December 12th in the year of our Lord 2024. Morning glory and evening grace to everyone out there. I am so glad to be talking to you this morning because I do not believe a lot of the American media understands what Israel has done in the last 48 hours. It's what we didn't do when Team Biden bolted Afghanistan. We left behind billions in high-end weaponry, billions in tanks and armored vehicles, gazillion rounds of ammunition, left it all there for the black market and for terrorists around the world. Assad falls on Saturday, and by Sunday, rebels are consolidating their various slices of Syria, and we don't know who's going to turn out to be a Salafist, jihadist, crazy, who's going to be turned out to be a Turkish proxy, a Kurdish proxy, proxy of the Gulf Arab state. There's going to be a civil war in Syria for a long, long time. And it may end up being a bunch of statelets. It's a failed state right now. But Assad is gone. His jails are open. But he had a gazillion weapons. He had stockpiles of chemical weapons because, of course, the Obama deal that was allegedly going to remove all the chemical weapons from Syria didn't happen. He made more after that deal, after the red line was crossed and Obama did nothing. All Syria did was build more and more and more weapons of mass destruction. And over the last 48 hours, the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Navy have destroyed 80 to 90% of everything that the Syrian army, the Assad army, had. And I'm going to read to you from Emmanuel Fabian story in the Times of Israel, but I encourage you to just think about what they accomplished. All the world owes Israel a thank you. Like running around Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union, collecting loose nukes was one of the great achievements of the George H.W. Bush administration. What Israel does and has been doing in the aftermath of the fall of Assad is one of the great things I've seen done from the story. Following a major 48-hour bombing campaign in Syria, the Israeli Defense Forces on Tuesday said it had destroyed most of Bashar al-Assad's regime's strategic military capabilities in an effort to prevent advanced weaponry from falling into the hands of hostile elements. In a statement, the IDF said that its Air Force and Navy had carried out over 350 strikes against strategic targets in Syria since the fall of the Assad regime over the weekend, taking out, quote, most of the strategic weapons stockpile in Syria. The military estimated it had eliminated 70 to 80% of the former Assad regime's strategic military capabilities. The operation was dubbed Bashan Arrow within the military, after the biblical name for the Golan Heights and the southern Syria region. The IDF released footage from the campaign, which it said targeted 320 sites across Syria. The strikes began late Saturday afternoon, first taking out Syrian air defenses to give the Israeli Air Force more freedom. Wave after wave of airstrikes carried after, this is not like the Marianas Turkey shoot. For those of you who are World War II history fans, that was when, in the Battle of the Philippine Seas, the American jet fighter force destroyed the Japanese opposition. Wave after wave of airstrikes carried out by IAF fighter jets and drones hit the Syrian air bases, weapon depots, and weapon production sites in Damascus, Homs, Tartus, Latakia, and Palmyra, according to the military. The military said the airstrikes destroyed many long-range projectiles, Scud missiles, cruise missiles, coast-to-sea missiles, air defense missiles, fighter jets, helicopters, radars, tank hangars, and more. The IAF also targeted several chemical weapons sites in Syria during the first wave of strikes. Meanwhile, on Monday night, Israeli Navy destroyed 15 Navy vessels belonging to the former regime at the Minat El Baida Bay and Latakia port on the Syrian coast. The Assad regime was an ally of the Iranian regime, part of the so-called Axis of Resistance, and it's been basically a Autobahn for weapons from Iran to Hezbollah, and that's over. We have no intention of interfering in the internal affairs of Syria, said Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. but we certainly do intend to do what is necessary to ensure our security. Hence, he said the IAF was bombing, quote, military strategic capabilities left by the Syrian army of the ousted Assad regime so they won't fall into the hands of jihadists, close quote. More quote. We want correct relations with the new regime in Syria. But if this regime allows Iran to reestablish itself in Syria or allow the transfer of Iranian weapons or any other weapons to Hezbollah or attacks us, we will respond forcefully and exact a heavy price from it. What happened to the previous regime will also happen to this regime. Then Israel's defense minister issued a warning to some of Syria's rebels who are considered to be Salafists, saying that any entity that poses a threat to Israel will be targeted relentlessly. Quote, the IDF has acted in the last few days to attack and destroy strategic capabilities that threaten the state of Israel. He said a tour of the Haifa naval base, during which he was briefed on the Navy strikes on the Assad regime's now sunken Navy. Katz reiterated that the IDF is creating a demilitarized area in order to sterile defensive zone in southern Syria near the border without a permanent Israeli presence, but not allowing anyone to move within it. It's an extraordinary bombing campaign, and I have not seen any headlines on it anywhere. That's because we got a lot going on here. Donald Trump keeps pumping out nominations for his second term. The Speaker of the House sat down with Brett Baer last night. John Thune's coming here this morning. They're getting ready to get the first budget done. I heard the Speaker say yesterday the budget will be done in January before President-elect Trump takes office again, and they can move out. Meanwhile, who's most upset? Always look for who's most upset with what the Israelis did, and then you can judge whether or not what they did is a good thing. Iran is upset. They are blaming the fall of Assad on U.S. and Israel. It's a great hallmark of a totalitarian government whenever they do things that are absolutely, positively, 100% fable. And everybody knows it. It's a great mark of a terrible regime. When they step up and say, oh, Assad, we hardly knew ye. But the butcher is gone. He's in Russia somewhere. And we've got Iran complaining. We got a lot of show coming up for you today. And I just want to focus your attention. I'll talk with Matt Continetti on this. This is such an important strategic development. The destruction of an arsenal of weapons of mass destruction. The destruction of the hardware and advanced weaponry of a totalitarian regime. The stories are heartbreaking, actually, as the free people of Syria, at least in the chaos of the flight of Assad and the dissolution. Because, of course, when a regime falls like this, nobody but nobody who worked for it wants to be anywhere near anything associated with the regime or they get strung up. There's a lot of violence going on in Syria, a lot of vigilante justice being meted out right now to former members of the Syrian army. It's a 13-year civil war. There's no way around the violence that is coming now as payback. And there's going to be a lot of payback that has got nothing to do with Assad. But the one thing the world doesn't need are for chemical weapons that Assad had, that he used on his own people, to get into the open black market of the international arms dealing. And I'll talk with Matt Continetti about it. It's an extraordinary display of military prowess by Israel. And the irony is that the massacre and the slaughter, the awful events of 10/7, are looking more and more like the awful events of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, where the Imperial Japanese Navy awakened the sleeping giant that was the United States. Well, the sleeping giant here is the little country of Israel with the giant-sized punch, because in the 14 months since 10/7, Israel has destroyed all of Hamas's control. There are Hamas fighters and terrorists left in the tunnels of Gaza, as there are 100 hostages alive or dead. They have destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon, South Lebanon, thrown that country back to the free people of Lebanon to decide what to do with Hezbollah. And they have destroyed Syria's weaponry, and they have attacked Iran without consequence twice, and they've left Iran alone and naked to the world. And one wonders whether or not Joe Biden, desperate for any kind of accomplishment. Now, I'm not quite sure he's sentient. I don't think he's thinking very well. There are some very disturbing bits that leak out of the Biden White House. But whoever is running the country for the next 40 days, think about this. It is time to hit the Iranian nuclear sites as that regime reels backwards under the ferocious and sustained assault of the Israeli Defense Forces. My hat is off to them. I want to thank everyone who has been helping us out with Angel Tree. Yesterday we raised money for 553 kids. So many hundreds of you who are listening right now thought that it was a great, good thing to spend 30 or 60 or 90. It costs $30 for Angel Tree to reach one child during this period of season of Christmas, where that child gets a note from mom or dad in jail, along with the present the child requested, a youth Bible, and a connection to Angel Tree. $30 isn't a lot of money, but when you do that, or you give 60 or 90 or 155 kids, I'll do all the math for the Steelers fans, you're changing a life. You're creating joy on Christmas morning, which is often a very sad time for a child whose mother or father is not there on Christmas morning, but they can be there in spirit and in a letter that really does light up their life. There's a banner over at HughHewitt.com. Please be as generous as you can. Yesterday, the markets were off all a little bit. We're beginning to hit that part of the season where the market swing, the volume's down. People are doing Christmas parties, and that's fine. Christmas parties are for people. But yesterday, the Dow was off 0.35. The S&P was down 0.3%, and the NASDAQ off 0.25%. So not much going on, except gold. This, of course, is brought to you by AmericanFederal.com, our gold sponsor. AmFed Coin and Bullion has been doing this for 40 years, buying and selling gold. Gold went up to $2,728 an ounce yesterday. Shazam. I don't know what that is. Again, Nick Rovich tries to keep me up to speed on why gold acts the way it does. He's the fellow who buys and sells gold, 1-800-221-7694. You want to talk to Nick or one of his team, 1-800-221-7694. I got a note from Nick yesterday because I may have been misunderstood. One of his customers called and said, you don't take checks. He does take checks, but it's got to clear. So if you send him a check for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, whatever it is, however much gold you're buying, it's got to clear. The money's got to be there before they do the strike price, because gold goes up and down like that. That's a $40 jump overnight. So people who are holding gold, big gold, long-term gold, they're doing a dance, a jig. And some of you are wondering, should I get in now? I always say the same thing. I don't give financial advice, but if you're going to buy gold, do it on a dollar cost averaging basis, meaning you buy the same amount every month or every quarter or every 6 months or every year. Do it with the same guy, Nick Rovich, in American Federal, because it's straightforward. You send him the money, he sends you the gold, you agree on the commission beforehand, the commission comes down. The less you buy, the higher the commission. The more you buy, the lower the commission. This is a very, very classic principle of economics, because Nick is the middle guy. He gets the gold and he waits for your call, then he checks the strike price. If you're someone who's into coin collecting, yes, you can call Nick and talk to him all day long. You people are different from me. That's not what I do. But coin collectors, call up 1-800-221-7694 and shoot the breeze about collections. If you're trying to sell your gold bracelets, your gold coins, whatever your grandpa left you in the top drawer, the $20 gold piece you know anything about, Nick will treat you fairly. Give him a call. That is the way to go. 1-800-221-7694. I was on Special Report last night. Brett Baer and Josh Holmes of Ruthless and wonderful lefty who worked for Joe Biden. And the key was the reconciliation bill, because Brett had interviewed Speaker Mike Johnson. I'll talk to incoming Majority Leader John Thune about that a little bit later. Cut number 10.
Hugh, there is confidence in there in that interview, despite what's going to be basically 217 to 215 by the time it gets to Inauguration Day.
Well, I think the incoming president has a very big Thor's hammer that he can lay on anyone, Brett, with a promise of a primary opponent if they oppose the budget and the reconciliation. The one thing that unnerved me is that Speaker Johnson told you maybe 2 reconciliation bills. I think that's a terrible idea. I would do it all at once. I'd go very far, very fast. The border, the military. Every employee in this country needs to know what their taxes are going to be in 2026. And the sooner they know,
talk more with
the
John
better
Thune
off.
about that.
Go far and go fast, Congress. Joined by Matthew Continetti, head of domestic policy studies at AEI, co-host of the Commentary podcast, which is among my daily listens, columnist for commentary in the Free Beacon. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. How are you?
I am good, but I am disturbed. I want to begin with the bizarre story and then move to what the IDF did in the last 48 hours. The bizarre story is a man 50 years old with two sons and a wife is murdered in the early morning hours of New York, and online media and national media goes crazy over the killer, who seems to me to be obviously a psychiatric case with a psychotic break in there somewhere. Why are we spending more time talking about the killer and not Mr. Thompson, who was the CEO of United Healthcare?
I wish I knew the answer. It's part of the moral inversion of our times, where criminal behavior is glorified and celebrated, and the people who try to do right by the law are often vilified or even prosecuted. There's no better contrast, I think, than the reactions from the left to the apprehension of Luigi Mangione on one hand, and then the acquittal of Daniel Penny in New York City on the other. I will say that there's always, there's a long history and tradition, Hugh, of people glorifying violence or anarchists, assassins, people with a political point of view or assumed political point of view when they take on revolutionary violence. This is nothing new. You can go back to the 60s, of course, the Weather Underground, the SLA. You can go back even earlier and think about some of the assassinations from anarchists of American politicians, the celebrated cases of course, of Sacco and Vanzetti. You find certain kind of cults of personalities that form around deranged killers. It's a sign that human beings are not perfect, far from it, and so it takes a lot of energy and purpose, I think, to keep our moral compass straight.
There was an editing function when media had gatekeepers. So when Versace was murdered by the serial killer, and that's 25 years ago. People aren't going to remember this, but there was a serial killer who ended up killing Versace, started in San Diego, went on a killing spree. The whole country was transfixed by this guy who ended up killing the famous fashion designer, and then it went away. However, that was a storyline. This wasn't the storyline. Is assassination of Mr. Thompson in the Brian Thompson in the street. I really don't understand how people can turn a psychotic into a sort of internet sex symbol. It's disgusting, actually.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I think part of the fascination since Mangione was apprehended is about kind of the story of the family. Here's someone who comes from a very prominent family in Maryland. He is an Ivy League graduate, went to a prestigious prep school for high school, and yet here he is found by himself in a McDonald's on the lam after gunning down a man in the back and depriving two young boys of a father. It's absolutely terrifying and a tragedy. But what's really disgusting, I agree, are the people who are trying to make some type of political argument about it, trying to say that somehow this act of violence and terror was justified because people sometimes get annoyed with their health insurer. I mean, that is beyond the pale to me. And again, it's a sign of what sensible, regular people who play by the rules and people who have a moral compass that's fixed north have to deal with. And they have to always remember that there are forces in this culture that are trying to invert morality so that what is evil somehow becomes justified. And that has to be fought against.
We are under a deluge of that, and I want to use your opportunity to bridge from beyond the pale as a cliche. The pale was a place. It's a place where the czars sent the Jews of the Soviet Union predecessor Russia, Imperial Russia, to live, and they got out of the pale if they could, and if they didn't, they either died in Hitler's extermination or they got to Israel, the United States, after the war. I want to talk about where the pale lives now, primarily, which is Israel. The last 48 hours, Matt Continetti, has been an enormous display of competence by the Israeli Defense Forces. And I mean extraordinary competence. There isn't anything left of the Syrian weaponry. It's the opposite of what we did in Afghanistan. We just left. We didn't bomb anything. Israel's just making sure that whoever runs Syria, and it might be 5 or different statelets, they're not going to have chemical weapons. Do you think America's aware of what's going on and what the IDF has done?
Well, I hope so, Hugh. Sometimes with this president, it's hard to tell what he's aware of and what he's not. I think the dazzling display by the IDF, first, just to go over some of the numbers, 480 strikes plus in 48 hours, an estimated 80% of the Syrian military destroyed by these strikes. The capacity of the former dictator Assad completely wiped out or close to it. This is a stunning achievement, and we have to put it in the context of other stunning achievements that the IDF has performed over the course of the past year plus, including essentially ending Hamas as a military force, including taking out Hezbollah, weakening Hezbollah to such a degree that the Syrian regime next door to Lebanon and Israel became weakened and vulnerable to internal rebellion. Also, wiping out Iran's air defense system in Israel's attack of October, along with ballistic missile production facilities. This is an incredible display by the IDF, by the small country of Israel, surrounded by adversaries. And so, what is behind it? I think you look at 3 ingredients. You look at power, action, and will. Obviously, the power is there, the military power that's on display, the capabilities, whether it's offensive or whether it's intelligence, the whole pager plot, taking out the Hezbollah echelons through this intelligence and spycraft, giving them the weaponized cell phones and pagers. Look at action, the willingness to take decisive action. Again, whether that was the beginning in Gaza and then moving from Gaza to the north, then going and dealing with Iran, now dealing with the remnants of the Assad regime in Syria. But most important of all, in my view, is the willpower, and the ability to understand where your interests are and pursue them with concentration, determination, and focus. This is what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has done, despite having a key ally, the United States, attempting to hold him back and slow him down for over a year. It is really stunning and impressive, and thank God for Israel.
Let's pause for a moment. Amen. Thank God for Israel. They're doing the work that the West has not been able to do for the last 4 years because it's been essentially a leaderless West. And I want to focus for a moment on Netanyahu, who evokes in a lot of Israelis, because I consume a lot of English language Israeli media. I don't speak Hebrew, so I don't get to read the good stuff, but I get the translated stuff. It struck me that Netanyahu evokes in people the same sort of TDS that we see here in the United States from some of the fringier critics of Trump, in that he just drives some Israelis nuts. Meanwhile, he has been the leader of the West, the de facto leader of the West for the last 14 months. And what happened on 10/7 is looking more and more to me like a much smaller but no less lethal and disgusting display of what happened on December 7th in 1941. A peaceful country ambushed and enraged strikes out and awakened, strikes out in a way where their very experienced leader, Netanyahu, just systematically mows through all of the enemies. I am amazed at the last 14 months. I'm wondering, do you think anyone's opinion of Netanyahu, who's on trial, by the way, that's the extraordinary irony. He's in the dock, even as they're destroying Syria. Do you think this will cause a reassessment of Netanyahu here or in Israel?
I believe that the main camps are pretty fixed when it comes to Netanyahu. He, like Trump, is an extremely polarizing figure, and people have found their opinions of him, and they tend to stick with it. I do think that there may have been a marginal group of people who had been pretty pro-Netanyahu over the past 2 decades, but after 10/7, after the shock and the horror of that event, as people were asking, how did it come to this? What was wrong with the Israeli strategic conception that left Israel so vulnerable to the attack? What was going on with the prime minister? Was it the case that Israel was distracted by the fight over its Supreme Court to make itself vulnerable to Hamas attack. There were some people who were pro Netanyahu who wavered a little, Hugh. But what they have seen over the past few months, and I think the turning point was Netanyahu's visit to the United States and his speech to Congress this year, where he said, we are going to go into Rafah. We are going to continue the fight against Hamas because this is an existential fight for Israel. That was a turning point. All of these plans then went into place with Hezbollah fighting against Iran, responding in a way the second time to the Iranian direct attack on Israel that much more forcefully than the first, not listening to Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan as Israel had done earlier this year. And now taking this advantage with the fall of Assad to wipe out the military assets and to prevent them from falling into the hands of terrorists or other enemies of Israel in the West. This is an extraordinary move, and I think it put some of those waverers back in the Netanyahu camp that helps him, at least in the near term.
Matt, let me ask you, we're going to go to a break in a minute, so it's a short response. When we assess Netanyahu over the last year and a couple of months, do you agree or disagree that he's been actually leading the West? He's been the only coherent. We've got Trudeau in Canada and Schultz in Germany and Keir Starmer in England and an incompetent Biden. Is Netanyahu really the only guy around with his marbles?
I think so. And I think what's happened is when he's taking out this Syrian military, he's thinking of his earlier predecessor, Winston Churchill, another man of a pretty small, beleaguered country who had to stand up and resist evil in the name of the West with very few allies for a time. And that, just as Churchill took out the French Navy after the France fell to the Nazis, yes. Here is Netanyahu taking out Assad's military after he fell to the rebels.
You know, Matt, in January 13th, I'm moving to afternoon drive, 3 to 6 p.m. in the east, noon to 3 in the west, so that people can hear coast to coast. I sure hope you're still going to talk to me from AEI. I'm going to put a block of time there because you're a very busy man.
But here I am.
So
I was getting used to waking up so early in the morning to talk to you now, and I'm going to have to keep up that schedule so I'm more productive, Hugh.
It's a very good schedule, and Mary Catherine Ham says the same thing, but we're going to the afternoons because I am looking forward to sleeping in and talking to the whole country as opposed to half of the country. Matt, this week I spent a couple hours with a field-grade Marine Corps officer who had been dispatched to Israel to study what was going on the ground in Gaza. And it's an extraordinary display of arms, combined arms in a very difficult terrain. And he explained it to me, and it became obvious to me, no modern army has ever come up against this sort of network. We did have some predecessors in Okinawa and Iwo Jima where caves and tunnels were used by the Japanese Imperial Army as last stands, but nothing like what was constructed by Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north. Do you think Americans appreciate what the IDF has done?
I do believe that the American people appreciate it, Hugh. And I think if you look at public opinion polls, if you look at the displays of affection and support for the state of Israel, people do understand the difficulty of what Israel has been through and what it has accomplished over the past year. Whether the Biden government understands it is a different question, which is ironic because Biden and his team, of course, have access to the intelligence, have awareness of the extent of the tunnel network, of the militarization of Gaza, of the strange nature of Hamas as this terrorist force within essentially an army. And the army is what Israel has crippled, has destroyed over the past year. So there is a divide, I believe, between the American public and the American government when it comes to appreciating what Israel is up against and what it has achieved. But I will say this, that come January, that divide will no longer exist. That the income.
Let me ask you the key closed question. Did Jimmy Carter live long enough to assure that he saw that he would not be the worst president in modern times? Because I think Joe Biden is easily the worst president in modern times, and part of it is this incredibly flaccid approach to Israel, inverted morality, confusion, mixed signals. It's just put Biden down. The only thing he could do right now to redeem this is to bomb Iran, and they're not going to do that, the nuclear side. Do you think Joe Biden is now the worst of all the modern presidents?
was clearly the worst in my lifetime. I was spared having to go through Jimmy Carter. I will say this, Hugh, Jimmy has about 40 more days. And at the end of 40 days, Biden will leave, and Jimmy Carter can rest easy that he has been replaced as the sorriest president of modern times, for sure.
Do you think they're self-aware of that? Like Jake Sullivan and Tony, that they are the worst?
No, no. Think about these speeches that they've given defending their actions, or even crazier, taking credit for some of the things that happened. To have Jake Sullivan go to the Reagan Forum and say, oh, yeah, it's our foreign policies that led to a week in Iran and the end of Assad, or to have Biden come to the Brookings Institution just yesterday and defend his economic record after it's clear to everybody that the Biden induced inflation is what gave us President-elect Donald Trump. That they are not aware of. The self-awareness of their culpability for the current situation is completely missing, and it's why the Democrats lost.
Got wiped out. Matt Continetti, thank you as always. I look forward to talking to you a couple more times in the morning and then in the afternoons. We'll find a time. We'll make sure it happens every week because people look forward to hearing from Matt Continetti of AEI and commentary. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Hugh.
You want to know what's coming to America? Then go out and get Kevin Roberts' brand new book, Dawn's Early Light. Dawn's Early Light is written by the CEO of the Heritage Foundation. The president of the Heritage Foundation is a guy named Kevin Roberts, a wonderful man standing up for a lot of the values that have driven the conservative movement for all of these many years. And his brand new book, Dawn's Early Light, available in bookstores now, available at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. Dawn's Early Light charts out the path of going back to save Washington, D.C. from the administrative state. And Kevin Roberts is blunt, he's on target, and he never minces words. Dawn's Early Light, available in bookstores now. I'm joined by Mary Catherine Ham, co-host, actually host of the Getting Hammered podcast, up early this morning and looking happy. Mary Catherine, I have to ask you about two horrible stories. I'm sorry to ruin your morning this way.
All right.
I am disgusted by the response to the murder of CEO Brian Thompson of United Healthcare. Disgusted. And I cannot think of a parallel except for the murder of Versace 25 years ago when we kind of followed this serial killer across the country, ended up in South Florida assassinating Versace. Are you as stunned at this display of moral idiocy as I am?
I wish I were stunned, and I'm not sure which display of moral idiocy you mean. Is it the one before we knew who he was, where everybody was just excited that someone had killed a healthcare CEO and thought that was a great reason to pivot to their policy preferences? Or is it the moral idiocy after we found out who he was and they saw some cute pictures of him online and now they're making tribute videos to him and putting him all over the place? There was a Kimmel monologue, or part of Kimmel's monologue last night was reading text messages from his staffers about how attractive the alleged killer is. This man, as my friend Guy Benson points out, the victim has two teenager 20-something sons. They are seeing this. It's horrific.
Yeah, that every headline I see, every X post that somehow glorified a guy I think had a psychotic break. It only makes sense to me to compare him to the Gabby Giffords killer, who had the crazy stuff in the backyard, and he's got the Unabomber's manifesto. It's not a political statement. It's going to be a psychotic break. But I just can't believe that people are so indifferent to the suffering of the people who are injured by his murder. Not just his boys, not just his wife, but everyone he worked with, every one of his friends, his mom and dad might be alive. It's just so cruel.
Yeah, it's making me pretty sick to my stomach, beyond the actual murder, to watch. I mean, as if that were not terrible enough to watch people react this way. And then you have this bizarre juxtaposition of, let's say in Kimmel's monologue, these gushing texts. Imagine that those same people, he was reading texts similarly gushing about an actual hero, Daniel Penny. Those people would be horrified because it's not okay to praise a man who saved people on the subway car, right? He's not okay to talk about, but the guy who cold-blooded, execution style, killed a guy for the job he has, it's okay to gush over him. The juxtaposition of those two is making me a little insane.
All right, second story that's deeply disturbing. Later in the day, I'm going to close the show with Maureen Moloch, who is as a parent who lost a child to suicide, who's testified on behalf of the Kids Online Safety Act. If you read the Washington Post this morning, you're going to be scared to death. I just sent it to my children because of AI chatbots that lead children to self-harm, suicide, and become their friends and suggest. Are you aware of this whole problem?
I know that
AI?
this exists. Yes, I know that this exists. I know that it can suggest very strange things to children. Our children are very limited online. I think we're in a good place where they were young enough when the pendulum started to swing away from access to children and sort of the cultural understanding of this might be dangerous for them. But I don't know what we're going to do in the future because there are many tools that can be really helpful, and I want them to sort of be versed in how to live online and figure out what's good and what's bad. But merely putting them out there for that is a risk in and of itself.
Yeah, the headline in the Post is an AI companion suggested he kill his parents. Now his mom is suing. A new Texas lawsuit against Character.ai alleging its chatbot poisoned his son against his family as part of a push to increase oversight of AI companions. There's also testimony on the Hill yesterday. I'm going to be talking with one of the parents of one of the victims of this. I really do not know what to do, Mary Kat. Do you have any preliminary thoughts on? All I want is none of my grandchildren near computers. That's basically what I want.
Yeah. No, I wish I knew what to do because on one hand, the idea of like an online system where one of my kids could chat with like a book character come to life would be something that they would love because they love books and they would love to sort of engage in that way. And I know there are things that are available that do that, but what does that lead them to? Even something as simple as children's games where they can be online. I don't know who else is playing the game and who else is online. So we're very strict about it, to the chagrin of my children occasionally. And I'm skeptical also of the federal government attempts to fix all of this because I don't even understand it and I'm not sure that they do.
Now, Mary Catherine, you can be the morning show for any time of the day, and I won't even mind because I'm moving to the afternoons finally. I've done my 8 dog years of morning radio, and I get to go and move to the Cush zone where Guy Benson lives, 3 to 6 p.m. in the East. And as you know, that is a lot normaler, if I can make up a word, than doing this morning thing. And I appreciate your getting up, and I hope you will deal with me in the afternoons. You and Vic will join me in the afternoons. But I wanted to ask you about gaming and the Ham family. There are 4 children. There's Steve. There's you. We hear this, but I haven't heard you discuss this. I spent untold hours playing Civil War games and Monopoly and all that kind of stuff 60 years ago. Do your kids do that anymore? Does anyone do that anymore?
Yes, my kids like games. As I said, we are sort of an offline family for them, so they have to be analog, so they find things to do. They like memory games. I would suggest 2 that are good for playing with children. One is It's in the Bag, which is sort of a charades combo. It's not a board game, but it's a charades sort of party game type thing, but it's good enough for adults and medium-aged kids, elementary school kids to play together, which is a hard thing to find. And then another one is called Zingo, which is sort of a bingo game for like toddler age children. And they will actually play it. It's very fun. It improves their vocabulary and they actually can learn the rules of a game.
What's the name of that latter one?
It's called Zingo. And the bingo cards that you call out are not numbers and letters. They're just pictures of, a ball, a snail, and they put it on their little card and it's adorable.
Now, I want to know if you've taught your kids either hearts or gin rummy. I have taught my older grandchildren how to play hearts. And, of course, they get in your face whenever they shoot the moon. Or gin rummy, which they love when they give you the queen of spades. I mean, it's really getting full emotional ragging on it by kids. And I'll let them learn how to play Risk. Do you teach your kids cards games?
In theory, I love card games, but I have a defect where my brain forgets every card game I've ever learned within 3 days of having learned it. So someone else is going to have to take over that particular thing. But Steve is a secret nerd, and he loves all sorts of games. So we'll have him.
Well, gin, if you go online, you can find. I had forgotten gin. I hadn't played gin since college. And it took me about 1 minute to have it all flood back with a YouTube video. Ditto Hearts. And Hearts teaches numbers and numeracy and all these different things. I just think card games are great, but they've gone out of style. And I look at the chat Character.ai thinking to myself, golly, these kids aren't having any fun. They're engaged in emotionally distressing fake universes all the time.
Yeah, and that's what we attempt to fill the space with other things in this house. And it's amazing what your kids will come up with if they don't have access to a screen. My kids play a bunch of organic games. They create plays. They write things. One of my kids wrote a podcast script, which was pretty dang good. We have not produced it yet. So
Okay,
this is
wow.
what they do. Yeah.
All right, I got one more question for you, and this goes to you have to reveal yourself a little bit here, Mary Catherine. When you buy Christmas gifts during the year, do you put them away and can't find them come Christmas time? Because this is the fetching Mrs. Hewitt's secret flaw. The perfect wife has got a secret flaw, which is she loses Christmas presents every year because she buys them year round and stores them places where she can't find them. And she showed me a video online that she says this is a shared problem, that many moms and grandmoms do this. Is this your problem too?
It would be my problem if I hadn't learned that I am so prone to losing them that it's worthless to do this from the beginning. So I just start within several weeks of Christmas so that everything is in one room at one time.
Well, have you got children of the age yet where they've begun hunter seekers? You know, they're out hunter gatherers of Christmas presents that are hidden in the house.
Yes, my older two certainly would, particularly the oldest. The second one likes a surprise, so maybe she wouldn't investigate too much, but I've got it pretty locked down about where they are. So we'll see.
Oh, I was such a hunter gatherer that I always stored Christmas presents at the studio where they couldn't get. But now the problem is the fetching Mrs. Hewitt has taken over the hiding of the gifts, and now we can't find the gifts.
They're gone.
They're gone. We'll find them when they clear the house out after we go to our rewards. They're going to find, what in the world is this? It's all wrapped up. Mary Catherine Ham, thank you for joining me. I will see you in, of course, a couple more times in the morning and then in the afternoons, although your friend and mine, Guy Benson, will be competing for your attention and your time, but hopefully you won't desert the Hugh Hewitt show when we move to the afternoons.
Not at all. I can handle it. All right, take care.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. Getting Hammered host, Mary Catherine Ham. I'll be right back, America. The good news is the weather inside the Beltway has been so awful that the inauguration is going to be wonderful. It's sort of like if you see your shadow in December, it'll be sunny in January. And you want sunny, bright, and chilly for inauguration. Salem Media is doing a special giveaway that you want to be aware of, the Trump Inauguration VIP experience. Text the name Trump to 94878, and you'll be entered in a contest to win 2 tickets to the inauguration, 2 tickets to an inaugural ball. Trump, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878. Trump, that's the word, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878. And you'll be entered in this. I want to play for you, Jasmine, because Angel Tree is very near and dear to our hearts. We believe in prison fellowship. We believe in ministry to people who are in prison. And we also believe in taking care of the children of prisoners. And Angel Tree does that. We got a little bit of tape from Jasmine, who was the recipient of Angel Tree's ministry when she was a child and her parent was locked up. Listen to Jasmine.
Oh my goodness. Like I could cry just thinking about it now because it just filled my heart that I was not forgotten because she was not close by to where I could actually visit her during her visiting hours. So to know that I was not forgotten was just like, I can't even put it into words, just the feeling of love and to not be abandoned.
There are a lot of moms and dads who cannot be with their kids on Christmas because they're doing the time for the crime that they did. But the kids don't know that, and the kids don't understand that, and they want a Christmas present or 2 from mom or dad. And you can make that possible. Every donation of $30 provides a gift for a child, a Bible, note from mom or dad on Christmas morning with the gift, talking about the gift. It's personalized. It's all selected by the child and the parent, wish list, Santa Claus letters, that kind of stuff. Angel Tree is pretty amazing. It's pretty remarkable. But they can only go as far as they are funded to go. And that's $30 from you. The banner is at HughHewitt.com. Please be generous. More than 500 of you stepped up yesterday. Thank you. Let's do another 1,000 today and just keep the donations coming in from coast to coast. I appreciate it. Joined by my favorite lefty Congressman, Ro Khanna from California. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Good morning. Pragmatic, not lefty, but love being on your show.
I love having you. The good news is we announced yesterday I'm moving to the afternoons, Congressman, from 3 to 6 in the afternoon drive on January 13th. That means your constituents will finally hear you when you're on because it'll be noon to 3 in California. So that's great news for you and me. We can continue these conversations. Congressman, let's begin with end of the year stuff. You folks hold on to power for another 20 days, maybe less, maybe 17 days. Are you going to pass a CR or anything meaningful in the next 17 days?
I believe we will pass a relationship with Speaker Johnson. We came into Congress together. We don't always agree, but he is someone who wants to make things work when he can, and I just don't think there's an appetite for not having the government funded.
All right, so a part of that funding, I want the Save AM radio bill attached to that. Has that, your Pallone buddy, who is the chairman of Energy and Commerce in the old days, he is a big backer of the Save AM radio bill. Are you?
I am. Look, I grew up listening to AM radio. I grew up outside Philadelphia. Actually, I was still listening to sports radio, Howard Eskin. I think we should absolutely be supportive of it, and I don't know the status of it, but I'll look into it.
Well, I think we got more problem on the Republican side than we do on the Democrat side because the Democrats understand the emergency broadcast system, and apparently some Republicans don't. They don't like mandates, but we do want AM radio mandated in cars. Congressman, what about the CR going beyond March? We really don't want it to go too far beyond March, do we?
Well, look, I don't want government to shut down, but obviously it's much better to actually pass a budget. And we have differences, Republicans and Democrats. I mean, Democrats want to increase taxes for people making over $400,000. Republicans don't. We have differences on priorities of what to spend, but that's the point of Congress. You come, you negotiate, and you get something done. And so I am hopeful we're actually going to get a budget done. Now, the Congress people have an incentive to do it because all of our community projects that we bring funding for in our own districts don't get funded with a CR. So if you want your community projects to get funded, you have to have an actual budget.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about a hearing that was held yesterday about AI and kids. I'm going to have a parent on a little bit later in the show, Maureen Molak, who's an advocate for the Kids Online Safety Act. You represent Silicon Valley. The chat boxes, including Character.ai, that engage kids have proven to be dangerous to kids. Has this issue crossed your desk yet?
It's outrageous. I mean, I'm one of the few people in the House supporting the Kids Online Safety Act. I represent the district. We are doing so much harm to our young kids. I mean, there should be some safety standards. This really shouldn't be partisan, Hugh. I mean, you have kids who are getting algorithmic content that is encouraging suicidal thoughts, that is encouraging them to get addicted to eating disorders. This recent case I think you're referring to is a young person who took their life because of an interaction with an AI chat box. And you look at some of the texts, they're heartbreaking. The young person is talking about how his parents are evil because his parents are restricting him to only 6 hours of access of phone time. And it's obvious that we're creating an addiction. We should pass, if there's one thing I hope Democrats and Republicans can come together on, is passing this Kids Online Safety Act. It's to protect children from the harms of social media. And I say this as someone who's very optimistic about technology and the possible benefits of AI.
Yeah, the only stock I own is an AI stock because I'm so we need it. We need it for a bunch of efficiencies in the world. But we do have to keep kids off it. John Haidt, as a lefty, has written the go-to book, The Anxious Generation, on this. Are Republicans obstructing the progress of this act, or are Democrats?
Candidly, it's both in the House. On the left, you have people saying, is this going to hurt the speech of the LGBTQ community because is it being drawn in an overbroad way? We managed, with legitimate civil libertarian concerns, we managed to make some good progress on that language so that attorney generals can abuse it on speech, either left or right speech. But then you have tech companies that, Meta in particular, that is basically lobbying against this bill. 68 senators passed it. It should pass in the House of Representatives. We only have 15 or 20 co-sponsors. And look, I think Jonathan Haidt's book is very much worth reading, and maybe it comes from the center-left perspective. But what he's talking about is the importance of building community. You know, when I grew up here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, we were outside. We played street hockey, we played Little League, baseball, touch football. I'm not saying we watched TV, probably too many Rocky movies, but you weren't addicted on your phone the whole time. There's some value to having community and kids in community.
Yeah, when I was growing up, there's only so much Gilligan's Island you can watch, and then you want to go outside. So that is the key thing. I'm glad to hear you're for it, Congressman, because you're from the district. I hope my Republican friends on the Hill understand there's a parent in America who will oppose this bill, and they just need to know about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit later with it. Let's turn to politics. You are one of the lefties, I hope, throw your hat in the ring for president, because it would be fun to have the debates with you on the stage as opposed to lefties who may not know so much. The question is your party going to even be able to elect a chairman? I really do. All I see is mayhem on the left right now.
Well, look, we lost, and when parties lose, it's appropriate to spend time to think about what went wrong. I think the Democratic with communities in the grassroots. Here's the irony: we raised $1.5 billion, and you still talk to local community parties, local community groups, and they say they didn't get any of the funding. We didn't have funding going to places like Philadelphia. We didn't have funding going to local state parties and county parties. And what is most important for the DNC chair is to get this party out of the grips of some of the consultant class and return the party's base to the grassroots local communities across the country.
So here's the admission against interest that you may or may not make. The vice president came out of the California Democratic machine. And if you were anointed by that machine, you win. And you don't necessarily have to deal with any kind of a serious challenge or a serious press corps. Do you think the California Uniparty is destroying the Democrats nationally? I mean, you are a Californian. It benefits you, but it sure doesn't produce resilient candidates nationally.
Well, look, I'm a hybrid. I'm very proud of representing Silicon Valley. It's probably the most innovative district in the world, and we've produced some people, including Musk, who's going to be serving President Trump. But my bearings in politics often come from my time in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I think about the kids who I grew up with playing Stratomatic or going to Phillies games and what they would think about policy. I do think one of the things that disserved Vice President Harris is just, unlike President Biden, who had to go to black churches and basically get to know every single person in Delaware, in California, you basically raise money, have to get the party and go on TV to win. And I don't think that is the right model nationally. You know, very quick anecdote. I talked to, which I think summarizes this election. I talked to a guy, Chancey, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 43-year-old African-American. He was on a podcast, and I called him up a few days ago. He shook Barack Obama's hand in 2012 when Barack Obama goes to Milwaukee and says manufacturing is back. And in 2022, Masterlock, where he was working $30 an hour, shuts down, goes to Mexico. It's the last remnants of NAFTA. And today, Chancey is working for an $18 job delivering pills to the customers. He can't get a high-paying manufacturing job in Milwaukee. Chancey didn't vote. Not a single person in the Democratic Party ever talked to him after he was on a national podcast. We've got to get back to fighting for people like Chancey if we want to rebuild this party.
Now, when that comes down to basics, the DNC chair, after the Republicans got blown out in 2008, we wanted a superstar, someone who was very fluent on TV, and we turned to Michael Steele, who's now really a Democrat. And I like Michael. Michael's a friend. But we made a bad choice in 2009. Do you think the Democrats are going to find a nuts and bolts man or woman to run the party, or are they going to look for a talking head?
We don't need a talking head. You know, the talking heads and people who offer a vision are going to be running for Congress and Senate and, you know, and doing elective office. At the DNC, we need someone who's going to recognize that we were losing that election in part before the bell even started, because we were losing the registration battle to people like Scott Pressler in Pennsylvania, and we were losing the registration battle in Arizona, and we were losing the registration battle in North Carolina. So if we're not on the playing field doing the nuts and bolts, actually increasing registrations, restoring the party's power to local community groups, then we're not going to be able to succeed.
Boy, do you know our party? Scott Pressler is like a superstar that no one knows about unless they're a Republican junkie, but you're right. I got to close this way. First of all, I'm glad to know there are other Stratomatic geeks who do politics, because I spent a gazillion hours playing Stratomatic, and it's better than any of the Major League Baseball video games. But Matt Parlow is the new president of Chapman University. He's a Yale Law School grad. He's a good friend of mine. He's a lefty, too. I mean, he's center-left. Good guy. I am curious, at Yale, did you take con law from someone? Did you take it from Amar?
I took it with both Bruce Ackerman and Akhil Amar.
Okay, so you know something about the Constitution. Did you like the deal that Chuck Schumer did that gave 5 circuit court judges to Donald Trump when he walks in the door in exchange for 12 district court judges now?
I was not for it. I mean, I think McConnell, as much as I disagree with things, is very effective in understanding how to get people of his ideology into positions in the federal judiciary, and we should be pushing that. I mean, those judges make a huge difference, and it comes down to the interpretation of the Constitution, where conservatives and liberals just have a difference of opinion.
Oh, yeah, I'm an originalist, you're not, but I do note that Chuck Schumer walked out of that meeting in a barrel. I'm very, very happy with what Mitch did. We got Leader Thune coming up. I got to compliment him on that as well. But, hey, Ro, have a great holiday season. I look forward to talking to you in the afternoons when the Silicon Valley can actually hear you.
I appreciate it. You're always fair. We got to do more of these kind of conversations around the country.
And good luck on the online Protect Kids Online Act. Good luck on that. Go talk to the Republicans and tell them they are in big trouble with the moms and dads of the world and the grandparents if they don't get that thing passed. Ro Khanna, California Congressman Extraordinaire, thank you. My favorite lefty on the Hill. Every single rational American, every center, right to conservative American ought to thank my next guest. Senator Steve Daines delivered the Republican majority in the United States Senate with the wins by Tim Sheehy in Montana, Bernie Moreno in Ohio, Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. Good morning, Senator, and congratulations and thank you. What a year.
Hey, thank you, Hugh. Well, we all, I think, breathed a sigh of relief after Election Day. A lot of smiles on a lot of faces across the country.
The only person who's mad at you is probably Tim Scott, because that's a tough act to follow. He's taken over your job as NRSC chair. He's got to go recruit candidates like you did. What's your advice to Tim Scott?
Well, first, Tim's going to do a great job. I mean, what an ideal leader to take the reins for the 26th cycle. But Tim has a great appeal, certainly, across our country, ensuring that we get the resources needed. It's going to be some big fights. It's more of a defensive posture in 26. A lot more Republican incumbents. We've got to defend that class of 14 when we picked up 9 seats that cycle. Much of that class that's still here, of course, are up for re-election in 26. But Tim's going to do a great job. He really is. He's off to a strong start, and I look forward to working with him as we go forward here in January.
Now, Senator, I've already circled Senator Susan Collins, who's a friend, and Senator Tom Tillis, who's a friend. We got other people to defend, but we could pick up a couple, right? There are a couple of places where the Democrats have got to worry.
No doubt. I mean, let's start with Georgia. I'd love to see Brian Kemp, Governor Kemp, become Senator Kemp. He'd do a great job. I think he'd win that race. That is a pickup opportunity. We should have 2 Republican senators in Georgia. Once upon a time we did. It wasn't that long ago, of course. Johnny Iverson, David Perdue. So that's a real opportunity. Look at Michigan. We were very close, certainly, in that race with Mike Rogers. Michigan's a state that Trump carried. Michigan's going to be competitive. So this is, of course, I said a defense kind of map for Republicans in 26, but there's some great pickup opportunities as well.
Now, I want to talk to you. The leader is coming up. Leader Thune is coming up after the break, Senator Daines. But you're on finance. So I want to ask you about the CR. First of all, I want to lobby you. I want the AM radio bill in the CR because we got to protect AM radio because of the emergency broadcast system. Do you think it'll make it into the CR?
I don't know, but I fully support that effort, Hugh. From a guy who comes from the great state of Montana, we are a rural state. Think about how many of my ranchers are out there early morning in their pickups that are listening to AM radio. It's very important for staying connected. Think about where they are hearing all the commodity prices read every morning, just in terms of public safety and so forth. Very important to keep AM. I support it. I can't tell you definitively it's going to be in or not. There's a lot of moving parts going on. That CR will likely pass probably on December 20th. It's another, I guess, tragedy of Washington where 27 consecutive years, Hugh, without getting budgets passed before the beginning of the next fiscal year. Very broken process. But the next best thing we got to do is make sure we get the CR passed by next Thursday.
Well, good luck on that, and I hope the AM bill makes it. Now, my next question is the budget resolution and the reconciliation process. I do not want two bills. I'll talk about that with the incoming leader, John Thune, after the break, because I think that business owners like me, it's a small business. There are like 8 people that work for me on the Hugh Hewitt Show, but I need to know what my tax rate's going to be in 2026 if I'm going to make decisions about 2025. Why wouldn't we do tax at the same time as the border, Senator Daines?
Well, look, Hugh, my background before I came into public service was private sector. Procter & Gamble, 13 years, and then 12 years with a cloud computing startup. We took the company public, and we sold to Oracle. So 28 years of being an executive in great companies of America. I'm very pragmatic, results focused. The way I look at it, Hugh, is let's make sure we get an outcome. What's the best path to do 2 things? One, deliver President Trump wins early, starting with securing the southern border. And 2, of course, would be putting permanence on the tax code. As a member of the Finance Committee, I think the key word here is permanence. None of this nonsense like a 4, 5, 6 year extension. One of the greatest problems that we have in Washington is the uncertainty that this institution places on businesses by having sunsetting in the tax code, whether it's the estate tax for personal planning or just basically for pass-throughs right now. Of course, they expire in 25. So we are going to get this passed in 25. Of course, the current code for pass-throughs expires at the end of 25. The important deadline is make sure we get permanence passed before the end of 25. So whether it's 1 or 2 reconciliation bites of the apple, I just want to have the path because it's the fastest outcome for securing the southern border, and second, getting permanence in the code. So I think
Senator,
I'm keeping my powder dry. Yep.
Please do. I do not think business owners can rely on a promise given the House, the narrowness of the majority there. They want it now. I'll argue that with Senator Thune, but you're on finance. I would put it all into one bill, border, defense, buildup, and the tax bill, and make them make their choices, right? It's hard choices. That's why it's taken longer.
Yeah, well, no, I completely agree. The tax piece will be a bit of a heavier lift in terms of the different variables that go into that very, very important policy. This is avoiding a $4 trillion tax increase that would have occurred had we not won the majority of the United States.
And that's why I thank you at the beginning, and then what have you done for me lately? I want that reconciliation early, Senator. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much. You did such a great job. Merry Christmas to you. Steve Daines did such a great job. Poor Tim Scott's got to come up with candidates like he had. Welcome to my Wednesday show. What a show thus far. Matt Conti, Mary Catherine Ham, Steve Daines, Ro Khanna, all leading up to Barry Weiss at the bottom of the hour. But right now, the incoming leader of the United States Senate, Republican Senator John Thune from South Dakota. Haven't talked to you, Senator, since you won election as the majority leader. Congratulations. I'm not sure you'll be happy that you won in a year. It's going to be a rough year.
Yeah, that's not going to be easy, Hugh. We know that, but thank you. We're looking forward to it. You know, you don't get this opportunity very often, and sometimes it doesn't stay around for very long. You know, we got a 2-year window here to get a lot of things done, and we intend to make good use of it.
Before we go to talk about reconciliation or anything like the AM radio bill, I want you to reflect on what it means to lose in politics but stick with it. Because a lot of people lost close elections, and they might want to leave. That happened to you, but you stayed with it. And I want to go back that you're the majority leader of the Senate now because you stuck with it, and I want other people to hear that.
Well, you know, I talked to, and as you know, this time around, too, we had a number of our candidates who lost very narrowly, almost got across the finish line. I've talked to all of them, just to encourage them to keep the door open and keep looking for other opportunities to plug in and to serve because, I think sometimes, particularly when you have a tough loss, it's a real gut punch, but you can bounce back. And I hope some of these folks do because there were some really quality candidates out there this time. And we're grateful for those who made it across the finish line, got us a 53-seat majority. But there were, several of them, as you know, out there who were just really, really high-quality candidates, and I hope they take another look at it.
I do too. And we got to also defend Susan Collins in Maine, Tom Tillis in North Carolina. A bunch of Republicans are up this time. That'll be Tim Scott, not Steve Daines' problem. But first, we got to save my business. Yeah, I want to lobby you, Senator. AM radio bill needs to be in the final CR, and then we need these tax cuts early so I can know what CapEx to do in January and February, not in July and August or maybe after we've lost the House majority. What's going to happen with reconciliation?
Well, first off, let me say there are a whole bunch of items, starting with securing the border, modernizing the military, unleashing American energy, and then, of course, extending the Trump tax cuts. They're all part of President Trump's agenda. And what I've suggested is a route to get, secure a big early win that advances the president's agenda and that is crucial for national security. My understanding is that President Trump is going to enact several executive orders regarding the border on his first day in office, and those executive orders are going to need to be funded in order to have teeth and to be effective, which is why I believe we ought to move on that part of the agenda right away. But let me just tell you, because I know you and a lot of other people are going to be really concerned about, certainty with regard to the tax code. To me, there's no way that we can fail on that. Failure is not an option as far as tax is concerned. But what I would tell you, just from a timing standpoint, having been through this a few times and been involved with tax policy for a long time, it's going to take a while to put that big package together because there are so many moving parts. There's a bunch of new ideas that President Trump's put out there. There are questions about which baseline to use, whether or not they ought to be made permanent, whether or not parts of it needs to be offset. And I think it's going to take a while. Plus, there are other pieces of it that we would like to include in there. There may be some things on spending cuts that DOJ comes up with that we're probably not going to get done with this until my goal is to have this done by summer. But I think that happens either way. If you do it in one piece or two pieces, I think that big tax piece is just going to take a while. So I think get some wins early, deal with the border, deal with defense, deal with some energy policy. And, these other pieces that are going to be fairly complicated, don't rush them. Make sure we get it right. And that shouldn't get those negotiations shouldn't get in the way of President Trump's efforts to secure the border. That'd be my view and my argument, but I hear what you're saying.
Now, I'm curious, Senator, because I understand what you're saying as well. There are some very difficult choices to be made. You've been on finance a long time. I don't know the tax code. I barely made it through tax when I was a law student. I have accountants for that. But I got to know if the pass-through is going to stick around, and I can't depend upon a promise from the House because the House majority is so little. Why not take that on which all Republicans agree? And because you're absolutely right on the border and the defense buildup, it's got to be in the first reconciliation. But can't we get things like the pass-through and the basic rate structure added into the first reconciliation and then worry about the complicated stuff in the second?
Well, and we've given some consideration to pieces that we might be able to include early on. And again, I think that, and by the way, the House majority, which is incredibly narrow, as you point out, does get better after those special elections. I mean, we're going to pick up those 3 House seats that right now are empty and give us a 217-250. And I mean, the Speaker will have a 220-215 majority in the first quarter, after the first quarter of next year when some of those special elections get out of the way. So it gives them a little bit of a margin, not a lot. But I think the pass-through deduction was the thing that we fought for, and that was the area of the code that I worked with in 2017. And just to make sure that we got parity with C Corp. C Corp's got the big rate reduction from 28 to 21. And in order to make sure that pass-through businesses, which are in my state at least about 99% of businesses, also got an equal type benefit, we created that pass-through deduction, and we need to make sure it stays there. And so that's going to be a huge priority of mine. And again, I don't know that if we try to do pieces of this early on, I think they're all going to have to ride together. The tax code has so many moving parts; it's all complicated. if we did that piece early on, my guess is it makes it even more complicated to get the rest of it later, because there are a lot of give and takes and trade-offs that occur in these fights, and I don't think it's going to be, honestly, I don't think it's going to be any easier for the House to do this earlier than it's going to be do it later, just simply because they're going to have more votes later on, and I think it's going to take us a while to piece this together.
Well, the reality is, though, Donald Trump arrives with Thor's hammer. And if anyone gets out of line on the first budget resolution before January, he can line up a primary opponent in the House in about 2 seconds. That's the only, I mean, we could actually lose the majority, Senator. That's why I am so adamant. And the guys who are listening in the studio right now, they're listening very closely, because bonuses and CapEx depend upon the pass-through, right? And there are people all over the country leaning in right now. John Thune knows the pass-through. What's he going to say? And they're not going to be happy to hear, well, wait until summer.
Well, but the thing is, the pass-through, of course, as you know, doesn't expire until the end of this year. And just drawing on the 2017 experience, we didn't get to the tax piece of reconciliation. We did the Obamacare repeal in the summer of that year. We didn't get in the tax piece until the fall of 2017. But none of this is all, the pass-through is there. I mean, the 199A deduction is there through this entire next year. And the deadline we have in front of us is December 31 of 2025. And I think that deadline works to our advantage, because nobody wants to see a $4 trillion tax increase. And I can't imagine any Republican in the House or the Senate who is going to vote to allow that to happen. So I think we have the pressure of the expiration next year working to our advantage, creating a deadline out there to ensure that it gets done. And like I said, as far as I'm concerned, failure is not an option. It's just something that we can't rush. We need to get it right. And I think there are things that we can do in a second reconciliation package on the spending side that we need to do too. And I'm hoping by then some of the DOGE work will be done, and we'll have a better understanding of what we might be able to do to actually do some things to significantly shave the cost of government, in addition to extending the tax policy.
Senator, the risk is just so high. Because Democrats don't share our vision on low tax-free enterprise, and if we lose the House majority or it goes sideways on that, my argument. I'm going to leave it alone. I want to move back to the AM bill. And why are there House Republicans opposed to saving AM radio? I don't get that. This should be in the CR like yesterday.
Yeah, and as you know, I think we passed it, with a big margin out of the Senate Commerce Committee a long time ago. I don't understand that either. And it seems like something that could ride on a year-end bill that's broadly supported in a bipartisan way. But the folks who are negotiating this, you have to have everybody got to have the so-called four corners, leaders in the House, Senate, Republican and Democrat, all on board to get it included in there. I'll run the traps on that and see what I find out. I'm not at the table on this quite yet. But I, like you, want to see that get done.
Well, let me congratulate you and Leader McConnell on one more thing. Chuck Schumer walked out in a barrel on the negotiation over judges. You gave him 12 district court judges. You kept back 5 appeals court judges for the Republican majority. So congratulations on that, Senator. That was shrewd. I don't know who gets the credit for that, but poor Chuck Schumer. I feel bad for him sometime negotiating with you and McConnell.
Well, thanks, you. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride in the years and the weeks and months ahead. But yeah, we have a ton of stuff that we need to get done, and that's why we need the reconciliation vehicle. It's why we need the majorities in the House and the Second, and in the Senate. We've got 2 years to do this. So, but only a year to do the tax stuff, as you remind me.
Yeah, only a month. I'm going to keep arguing with you, Senator. But thank you for joining me. And when we move to the afternoons, I hope you'll be here more often. We're going to the afternoons on January 13th. From 3 to 6 in the afternoon, so we can drive the senators home instead of driving them to work. John Thune from the great state of South Dakota. Thank you, Senator. So pleased to welcome for the very first time to the Hugh Hewitt Show, Barry Weiss, media revolutionary extraordinaire and the founder of the Free Press. Good morning, Barry. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited I'm on the East Coast so I can finally join you.
I know, the good news is in January, my program moves to 3 to 6 in the afternoon because I've done my time. I'm being released from morning drive to do afternoon drive. So maybe you will get up more often or be joining me more frequently. I know. I'm very happy about that. Barry, I want to focus on what the free I want to focus on what the Free Press has done, but there is a ritual for first-time guests. First time you've ever been on.
Okay.
First of all, was Alger Hiss a communist spy?
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I thought you were going to ask me something sweet like my favorite Christmas song. I don't know, Q. I don't know.
What, you don't know? Of course he was. Come on, Barry, go look up the Venona transcripts. Of course he was. Second question, have you read The Looming Tower?
I have read the New Yorker articles that were, I guess, became The Looming Tower, but I haven't read the whole book. And I will never lie about something I haven't read.
Close enough, because Lauren's right. That gives us the pathway to talk about the collapse of the Assad regime, which is going to lead me to the collapse of legacy media. I think legacy media is falling apart about as fast as the Assad regime did.
No, I was just going to say, I love these transitions from the Washington Post to the Assad regime, same sentence. You're like cooking
same
gas
sentence
here.
and same brittleness. I don't know, you're not old enough to remember when Solzhenitsyn was a dissident. He put out a book called The Oak and the Calf, in which he raised the question, what if it's all paper mache? What if the Soviet Union is just paper mache? Turns out he was right. Turns out the Assad regime was right. Are we discovering that legacy media is the same kind of paper mache?
Well, I definitely think that the objects in mirror are closer than they appear principle has applied to everything that's followed since November 5th. So I was no genius in being able to see that there was a crisis, not in trust, as like that's how it's often talked about. There's a crisis of trust in the media. No, there's a crisis in trustworthiness because it's deserved. And because people armed with social media and X, and frankly, their own eyes and ears, can see when they're being lied to about, to borrow a phrase of theirs, their lived experience. And so COVID was a major one of these things. The effect of lockdown on children, the fiery but mostly peaceful riots of the summer of 2020. Everyone has their moment. And then I think kind of the big kaboom happened on November 5th, where suddenly, Kamala Harris, who was, it was neck and neck, but she was probably going to win. Not only did Trump win, but the Republicans took the House, the Republicans took the Senate, and actually, like, we were seeing sort of like a major vibe shift, not just in politics, but I think also in the culture. And the magical words like you're a phobe or you're a racist or you're whatever that seem to have, corporate CEOs down to junior editors sort of trembling at the knees, all of a sudden felt like poof, that no longer worked. And so, you had sort of on November 6th and November 7th, these papers sort of trotting out the same talking points that they'd been using since 2016, 2017. And you just felt like it wasn't working anymore. And so we're in this very exciting, but I think liminal space where the old places still have the distribution networks. They still have the fancy offices. I'm sure they have very, very good free snacks. We have less good free snacks at the Free Press, although we do have free snacks. But what we increasingly have, and I don't just mean the Free Press, I mean the wild, wild west of independent media, we have attention. We have audience share. I mean, just look
audience share, eyeballs and ears. I was on Special Report last night with Josh Holmes. Now, there are a few podcasts that I listen to religiously. Honestly, from the Free Press is one, but Ruthless is number one, because Ruthless just makes me laugh, and I agree with the guys. And they're just R-rated. I want people to understand that. The Free Press is PG-13. I listen to Eli Lake whenever he shows up. I listen to you. I don't know that there's any time left for people who want actual content to waste it on stupid cable shows. And most of cable TV, I've got friends in cable TV, but most of it is just stupid, Barry. It doesn't seem to me like they read. Do you think that is a problem?
Well, I think it's a great thing for the business that I'm in. And frankly, I think it's a great thing for smart, curious, politically independent Americans, which is who we are reaching at the Free Press. And our bet is that it's actually the majority of the country. If you can choose to listen to, I'll just choose a recent guest, like a deep hour-long conversation with Peter Thiel, agree with him or don't agree with him. The guy's bets, both in tech and politics, have hugely paid off. So he's seeing around the bend in a way a lot of other people aren't. If you have the choice to listen to that or listen to whatever's happening in the 50 minutes that the ladies at The View are filling, what are you going to choose if you actually want to learn and there's limited hours in your day? Like, I know what I'm
How
choosing, and
long?
I'm choosing it every single time. And the thing
How
that I
long
can't
until HBO realizes that what Bill Maher's model is would be better done by Barry Weiss or Josh Holmes or Comfortably Smug or anyone under the age of 50 who's already got an earned audience on a podcast? When are the cable networks going to figure out they've just got to fire everyone and replace them with people who have actually earned an audience?
Well, I think Bill's earned an audience, to be fair, and I think the last 5 minutes of his show have been invaluable for the past few years, especially since October 7th. So I'm all for letting Bill keep his spot, and I think that that's mandatory viewing. But what I'll say, where I'll definitely agree with you is, I can't understand if you're looking at the numbers that a bad episode of Joe Rogan is putting up. If you're looking at Andrew Schultz or Theo Von, I mean, we can all name the people that we most listen to in this independent
Mary
world. The fifth
Catherine
column.
Ham, Ben Shapiro, you name it. Yep.
Exactly. Like, if you're just purely from a business perspective, why wouldn't you say, we're going to try it out with a few of these people and see how it goes? The problem is that the same dynamic that sent me running from the New York Times, I think, is the dynamic at a lot of these companies. In other words, I remember when we were producing the witch trials of J.K. Rowling, a project that I'm enormously proud of, and featured a woman who is arguably has written the most successful book of all time since the Bible. I think we can
The work of
credibly
genius.
say that.
The work of genius.
And
Yep.
basically mince money. Okay. I went around to, I won't name them, but all of the different podcast platforms. And what my team heard again and again from these people, often from the people running them at the very top, was, this podcast is going to be huge. And it was huge. This podcast sounds like it's incredible. And it was. I think it was extremely fair-minded and balanced and empathetic. And, I'm very proud of it. And to a person, with, some of them in a very blunt way, they said to us, we would love to buy this. We would love to have this exclusively on our platform, or sometimes we would love to advertise against this, but we can't risk it. We cannot risk the uprising inside of our company if we decide to take this on. So fine. I think it was like the 5th biggest podcast of that year. And, in the end of the day, the free press exists because we need to pursue our curiosity. And there was no way in hell, even if it was a huge money loser, that I wasn't going to pursue that project. But the point stands, which is that the dynamic, like, people can, like, in the mainstream culture, I think wokeness is massively receding. I think it's seen as cringe and authoritarian and has created a cultural chill that no one wants to live under, that's forced people to compelled speech and forced them to deny reality. Average people are feeling that. They're feeling the chill sort of melt, and that's a wonderful thing. But the reality is that inside a lot of these institutions, that cohort of people still wields a lot of power and still wields a cudgel, which inside those institutions is quite powerful. And so, it's yet to be seen. I read a really interesting article yesterday about, the Daily Wire. Again, agree, disagree with what they're doing. They have 200 million in revenue. And one, I think, key takeaway from that, there was a little Axios piece about their success, is that increasingly they're trying to, like, keep people on platform because they don't maybe need these other distribution channels if they have enough of a critical mass on their own. So I look to,
I mean, if
like,
you're a
the
book
success.
author, do you want to be interviewed by Ben Shapiro, Barry Weiss, or do you want to go on an afternoon cable show on CNN? The answer is easy. You want to sell books, you talk to Barry, you talk to Ben. I am interested in the risky choices you've made, Barry. You put Douglas Murray in poetry. I love this, by the way. I don't know anything about poetry, but I think Douglas Murray is a genius. Who in the world persuaded you to do that? Douglas Murray?
I had the idea. My truest pleasure in life. I love talking to you. I love hosting a podcast. I love being out and evangelizing the free press. But I am I'm an ideator. I love coming up with ideas and I love matching topics to people. And it struck me. I guess I made a risky bet, which is, I bet that our audience was deep, interested in things beyond the news of the day. And I felt personally that we do a lot at the Free Press and we will continue to do the work of like the basic, what I consider the basic work of journalism, which is holding up a mirror to reality. And reality these days, Hugh, as you know, is a very broken one. And so what that winds up being is like, oh my God, this is a lot of depressing things. You don't want to just offer people a sense of what isn't working. You want to also offer them a sense of like what's worth elevating, what's worth revisiting, what's worth living for, and frankly dying for, not to get too heavy at 8:30 on a whatever day it is morning. And I knew in Douglas Murray, since he'd been my friend for such a long time, that he's one of these like unbelievable triple threats who not only can speak in full paragraphs and hold forth on the news of the day, but is one of those people at a dinner party where I find myself like Googling under the table, like, what is this book that he's referencing? What is this piece of poetry? And I thought, why don't we do a column called like Things Worth Remembering and see how it will go? I have to tell you, I thought it was a very good idea, but I had no expectation that this would be one of our like most popular things that we do. And I'm just enormously gratified. So we did poetry the first year. We did rhetoric and speeches worth remembering this year, and we'll see what's coming next.
Barry, thousands of years of human evolution, millions actually, combined with the divine spark, have made people curious. They want to know things. How far can you take the free press in making it a platform for the curious people who want to reliably learn something and not be misled by AI? I mean, how are you going to persuade people this is reliable? As you said, trustworthiness is the coin of the realm doing what we do, and it's very hard to earn. How are you going to keep it that way that you've got it right now?
Well, that's the entire like proposition. So if we fail at that, the business will fail. The way that we do it, I wish I had some like secret AI or special algorithm to solve the problem of trust and trustworthiness. The answer is very simple and it's very hard to do. It's just story by story, conversation by conversation. It's sticking to the old rules that have been abandoned that I grew up under, which is 2 sources for every fact that's in the piece. We assiduously copy, edit, and fact check every single piece we run. And we do this really radical thing here, which is that when we make a mistake or we get it wrong, we admit it. And there's many pieces I've written for the Free Press with a giant in black caps at the bottom, correction. We also do something, again, that's kind of like fallen out of favor, which is we have an extraordinarily lively comment section, but we commission, we first of all welcome, and then sometimes even commission letters to the editor. So some of the things that have been the most successful, also I will say, that we do at the Free Press are, and there's again no way I would have been able to tell you this, live debates. It turns out people are actually very hungry. They're very thirsty for good faith disagreement, for disagreement that doesn't mean disrespect or dislike, for the idea that, Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris can come on honestly before the election and make the case for Kamala and Trump. And frankly, I think it was better than anything that happened on a debate stage this presidential election season. Or, debating foreign policy between Bret Stephens and Matt Taibbi, or, the after effects of the sexual revolution. Every single one of these debates that we've done live in cities across the country have been completely sold out. And so what that's telling me is something not just that's good for business, but like that fundamentally is good for the country, which is that Americans, or many Americans, I would say millions of Americans, don't actually want to live in an ideological silo where they just bathe in the warm bath of their own political biases. They're curious. They want to learn.
You're right.
And guess
The
what?
muscle memory of America is the Federalist versus the Anti-Federalist. It is a literate conversation among absolutely opposed forces, but everybody wins. And the free press is how you win this Christmas. go to the FP.com. I don't know if you're doing a sale for your Christmas thing, but the FP.com is where you go to subscribe. Can you gift a subscription to people, Barry?
Yes, you can. And I think it's an incredible gift for the very low price of just $80 a year. And Hugh, I have to say something, which is this is the first time we're meeting. We obviously, I'm sure, have disagreements on any number of political issues, but you have been such a generous champion of our work and of what we do. And I'm just enormously, enormously grateful to you. And so is everyone else at the Free Press. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Barry. I'm just one of those curious people who want back what you have given us. So thank you. Thanks to Ben Shapiro. Thanks to everybody at Ruthless. Everybody who's making it fun again, to learn again. Thank you. AM radio held the line for a long time, but now it's time to add to our lineup of sources, and the Free Press is among them. Barry, have a great holiday. Thank you for joining me.
You too. Merry Christmas, Hugh. Thanks.
I want to close today's show with a very important proposition. You need to learn about the Kids Online Safety Act. You need to support it. Here to discuss it is Maureen Molak, an advocate for the Kids Online Safety Act. Good morning, Maureen. I want to hear your story. I want you to know that at the beginning of the show, Ro Khanna, Democrat from the left, made a very strong endorsement of the Kids Online Safety Act on air. One of my progressive colleagues that joins me here. I think you're making progress. Tell us about the act and tell us your own story, which is, I'm sure, very tragic.
Well, thank you for having me, Hugh. You know, the Kids Online Safety Act is just common sense legislation to keep kids safe online. You know, two main objectives in the Kids Online Safety Act are safety by design and safety by default. And so safety by design, that would include a duty of care for the social media companies to take reasonable measures to keep kids safe from online harms through their design features. Those online harms can include cyberbullying, sexual exploitation, the promotion of illegal substances, and the design features that encourage compulsive use that can lead to anxiety and depression. And by safety by default, I mean that you know, parents need tools, and that's what COSA does. It provides them tools so that they are in the driver's seat to protect their kids online, and it also has some additional reporting mechanisms in it for parents.
So, Maureen, I sent my 7 kids this morning a story. Those include my daughters-in-law and son-in-law. A story from the Washington Post. An AI companion suggested he kill his parents. Now his mom is suing. And this isn't really about the Kids Online Safety Act, but it's about the same subject matter. There's a tsunami of artificial intelligence tools coming at kids who are under the age of 13. I don't think we're at all prepared for this. It's like standing on the beach after the earthquake. We're going to get swept away unless we run for it.
That's exactly right. Technology moves way faster than legislation does. And until we actually can get an inroad with a meaningful piece of legislation, and that is what COSA does, it would really set the framework for us to be able to have continuing conversations about what we need to do in order to keep our kids safe online. You know, we do certain things to protect kids that we don't do for adults, and that's why COSA is so needed right now. And we only have about 10 days left to get this done this year.
Why are you so involved in it, Maureen?
You know, after my son David, he died by suicide in 2016 after months of relentless and devastating cyberbullying. And, you know, David's story actually started way before that. He had a back fracture from playing too much basketball. And while he was rehabbing, he turned to social media and online gaming to fill the void. And over a period of about 8-9 months, we started to see a real change in his behavior. He was showing all those signs of a behavioral addiction, from lying and, about completing his homework. He was sneaking around using his devices. He would get angry and aggressive. We would try to get him to stop. And then he was stealing from us in order to purchase virtual assets to increase his player power through some of these gaming platforms. You know, at that time, after about 8-9 months, David was isolating himself, and we knew that we were up against something that we had never experienced in our home, and we were getting him the mental health supports that he needed. And that is when the cyberbullying started. It was like the final match on a huge bonfire that exploded in our home, and he took his life. Since then, I have been advocating at the state level. I'm from Texas, and then the last 3 years for the Kids Online Safety Act, because I really do believe that if it had been in effect, my son David would still be alive today.
Are you an optimist that COSA gets over the line in the next 10 days? Ro Khanna just can't believe anyone's not for it. And I'm a grandparent, so I can't believe anyone's not for it. What do you think?
I think there's a chance, right? We have to have hope, because if we keep kicking the can down the road, more kids are going to suffer and be harmed, and we may have children that die. And so, we're imploring Speaker Johnson to add this and come to the table and negotiate and add this to one of the must-pass piece of legislation by year end. We have heard out there that he is wanting to maybe consider this next year, and we're saying we can't wait. Parents can't wait. Parents are asking for this type of help. And additionally, we really feel like if President-elect Trump would come out in support of this bill, he would be a hero for America's families, because we have been asking for this for years, and we just can't wait. We know the administration next year has a lot of big agenda that they will be working on next year. And if we can get this done this year, it will be one less thing that they will have to worry about. Parents will get that protection, kids will be protected, and we'll start the year off with safety and security for American families.
President-elect Trump often surprises, like the Right to Try Act. So the Kids Online Safety Act is the sort of thing that I think might get through at Mar-a-Lago or at 1600. But it's on the table right now in the House, and if you're a member and you're driving to the House or the Senate this morning, ask your staff about COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, because there's a world of parents and grandparents who want this bill, and they will know if you are for it or against it. Maureen, thank you. I'm sorry about your son, but I appreciate your taking the time to join me this morning. The Kids Online Safety Act.